Councilmember Berman.
Here.
Burt. Holman.
Here.
Klein.
Here.
Niss.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Scharf.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
8 present.
All right. And we're here for the Architectural Review Board interviews. Do you need to announce that we'll be going to closed session, or do that at the end of this?
It's a separate meeting, so we will do it at the end of it.
Okay, great. So our first candidate is Q Kim. Mr. Kim, you want to come on up? And normally what candidates do is give a brief, short introduction, and then council will ask some questions.
Hello. My name is Q Young Kim. I'm a long time.
To the microphone. I mean, it'll catch a
Hold it or just have it catch?
It's fine
Okay.
there.
All right. I think you're all pretty much familiar with me except for Councilmember Niss, who was unable to be at the Planning and Transportation Commission meeting, which I interviewed for also. Like I said, I'm a longtime Palo Alto resident, similar to Councilmember Berman. I went to Duveneck, Jordan, Palo Alto High School, and then I went to architecture school down in San Luis Obispo. Graduated in 2008, and then proceeded to work abroad in Korea, where I was very interested in how I was a little bit different as a Korean American. During my time abroad, I also spent 6 months in Paris working for another architecture office out there, and then returned stateside, first to New York to do a small internship at a New York office, and then returned to the Bay Area in Palo Alto because my parents decided to move back to Korea, and it just worked out. But I've been here for a long time. As an architect, I'm very proud not only of our city, just in terms of where it is in Silicon Valley, but also in terms of its quality and character and architecture. And I would just love to serve the city and be a board member and to be able to contribute in a way that is productive. Thank you.
So coming back to council, questions?
Sure.
Karen?
Sure. Well, thank you for your application. Appreciate that. Your application says, what are the current issues facing the Architectural Review Board?
Yeah, I know, right.
But they're very general statements. So what are the issues of mixed-use development? What are the issues? You can't go into great detail about each of those, but let's just say mixed-use development. What do you think of the architecture and the issues as you see them?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of mixed-use development, there's a lot of opportunities on California Avenue. The bigger place that I kind of have some excitement for is the Barron Park neighborhood, where I think there's going to be a lot of redevelopment in the coming years. And I see mixed development being a positive way to have increased development just...
So that's land use. We're talking Architectural Review Board. So tell me what the issues are with the architectural aspects of these.
Well, I think mixed use is a project where it's not just land use, but it is, the quality and character of the buildings, and that the mixed-use buildings, especially even here in downtown, display a different kind of quality and character as opposed to a simply commercial building or simply residential building, of course. And I think there's a way that Palo Alto has gone about producing quality projects or approving quality projects, and I definitely think that we need to see more of that, especially in those redevelopment areas, whether it's California Avenue or Barron Park as well.
Liz?
Do you, I won't reflect that you're fairly young, but...
And how much of a positive that is.
Right. I know you'd be the...
You need to recuse yourself from these issues, Councilmember Berman?
As do I.
So, given your background, you have lived many places, obviously you've been exposed to many different types of architecture, from way to the east, way to the west. Do you have a type that you particularly admire, or one that you would even espouse?
Maybe I do, but I think beyond just the style of architecture, there's really kind of, qualities of architecture that allow it to fit in harmoniously to different cities. A building that works well in Paris may not work well here in Palo Alto, but I think having been a longtime resident and still a resident here, I kind of know what characters people are after, and perhaps some other characters that maybe aren't so present here, but that could be a positive quality or character of architecture here. And so I don't think I necessarily have one style that I like. Maybe there are some styles that I do like, but I think it's more about buildings and architecture that fit into the city existing landscape, as well as
Thanks. I like that answer.
Thank you.
Greg?
You're an architect yourself, and you'll be reviewing the work of other architects, how do you deal with conflict there? You might say, oh, we're one group here, and I'm not going to be very critical.
Well, I think, actually, I'm not quite an architect yet. I'm not licensed yet, so I can't call myself that. I am an architectural designer, but I think perhaps one of the benefits of being a little bit younger and still kind of a student of architecture with a capital A is that I still aspire to look after many different architects and different styles and different characteristics. And perhaps being a little bit younger, I don't really have a very strict mindset in terms of, oh, these are architects that I like, these are architects that I don't like, this is architecture that I like and don't like, but I'm more into really learning and seeing what a specific building is all about before really judging whether or not it would fit in harmoniously into Palo Alto.
Larry?
Tell us about what you've been doing for your firm and what they do and how much they do in Palo Alto.
Sure. I work for ACS Architects. We've been in Palo Alto for close to 30 years, before on Emerson, now on High Street. The majority of our projects right now are residential projects, single-family homes. We do have a multifamily project as well and some small commercial work. Only one of our projects is in Palo Alto, but I'm not a principal at the office, so I don't have any responsibility conflict situations there. But it's mostly myself and Carl, who's the principal architect. And it's been great for me at a smaller firm as opposed to different firms that I worked for in the past, because I get to really wear different kinds of hats, whether it's meeting with clients or being on the construction site or doing the basic design phases and so forth.
Well, just a quick follow-up. What's your favorite building in Palo Alto?
Oh.
Or your least favorite? Take either way you want.
Well, I bike to work when I can, and so one of the buildings that I pass by quite a bit is the old site in Sofa, where the Palo Alto Medical Foundation used to be. That multifamily residential development there, I think, is quite nice. It really fits in with the character of Palo Alto. A building that I maybe not so much like is the JCC. I live closer towards 101, and I pass by that building quite a bit too. I think there are qualities of that building that are actually very great, but from a larger street standpoint, where I see it the most, it's maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing or one that blends itself to the neighborhood.
Gail?
Welcome. How would you address issues of compatibility in terms of design? In terms of, let's say, a much more contemporary style with a much more sort of historical style. And what are some key issues you would look at in terms of trying to come to terms with how you address those kinds of issues as an aspiring architect?
Mm-hmm. I think that's similar with the whole style question. Whether it's a more historic-looking building or a more modern-looking building, I think there are key characteristics of buildings that are really important, whether it's the street setting or the pedestrian view or the way that people pass the building, the way that people interact with the building. I think there are large issues with those kind of questions in regards to the Grand Boulevard initiative over on El Camino, where we're talking about different sidewalk widths. And it's really about how much we, as Palo Alto, the larger city, can encourage development of buildings that really allow people to interact with the buildings, so that the people enjoy the buildings and they're not just simply a site, but they're one that where the buildings are experienced and they come in contact with it on a day-to-day basis.
Great. I was going to ask a question about the Grand Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
I won't. The other quick question, have you worked for any firms that have worked on bridges?
I briefly worked for Joseph Palomo Architects
Uh-huh.
on University, and at the time he had a proposed pedestrian bridge concept over 101 that's actually pretty close to where I live also, so it's a project that I'm very interested in. That's the only firm that I've experienced working with where they did some kind of bridge design.
Good, thank you.
What do you think about the aesthetics of, or the design of the new family housing project on Alma?
I think the housing component of it maybe is okay. If anything, having walked through that site, I think it's a little bit too close to the commercial development. I think the problem that a lot of people have with it is more so the commercial aspect of it and how close it is to the site.
Commercial aspect.
the word Mickey's used
No,
to?
no, I'm talking about the housing project.
801.
801.
Ah, okay, well, in that case, it's somewhat similar because there is that front on Alma Street. I think it was someone from the Planning Transportation Committee had said that the windows are very small and looks like someone could shoot arrows out of them. It's not a very friendly facade. The elevation on, it's a High Channing Forest? Homer is a lot more friendly. There's a lot more interaction there. The street elevation on Alma is a little bit more closed.
So I hear from people in the community that
Mhm.
they think that that project, for instance, is ugly. So I guess my question to you is, how can we get better architecture or a better feel so we get more attractive buildings in Palo? Do you have any thoughts on that? Things that we could do to make the buildings more attractive?
Well, I think even with that project, perhaps because it is lower income housing, I think those were kind of the benefits that allowed perhaps a developer to come in and say, well, we want to acquire this land and build something on it. And so perhaps if we have
I think
different...
we gave them the land. Or
So-
just a portion of it.
The old, yeah.
And so if there are different initiatives that aren't simply the ones that we have, but perhaps different ones that can encourage a better designscape for better developments of buildings that perhaps aren't so disliked by the community members.
And as a final follow-up, then, do you think if it is low-income housing, do you think that we should then have lower standards? Or do you think we should have the same?
No, not at
quality
all.
standards?
Yeah, Rob Wellington Quigley is a very well-known architect. He has that other project, the Opportunity Center, next to Town and Country. I wasn't there during the design process. I don't know exactly why he chose to go with that kind of a design on Alma Street, but I think there are ways that we can go about, perhaps trying to encourage more interaction with people and buildings, no matter what street it's on, whether it's Alma or whether it's Homer or Forest or whatever street it's on, but to really be able to encourage an interaction between the public and the buildings.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. If you want, you can have 30 seconds to close, or you don't have to.
Sure. Just in closing, thank you very much for listening to my somewhat mumbled answers. But I think I just want to emphasize that I really like Palo Alto. I love the city. I've grown up here for a long time. I'm not here because I want to make my name well known or anything like that. But I really do just want to be able to give back to the community. I think being a younger member of the community, I really would like to get involved and to see kind of where we can go together as a city. I know there's a lot of changes happening right now. There's a lot of young people working and living here, but I don't think we're properly represented in some aspects of government. And not that I would be a council member. I know my service is to really guide your decision, but I think I would be well qualified, and it'd be an exciting thing for me to do, and I'd love to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter Balte. Welcome, Peter.
Hi. I'm Peter Balte. I'm the principal architect for Topos Architects. We're a reasonably high-end architecture construction firm in town here. I've been here for 20-something years. Lived in Palo Alto for a while when my kids were younger, about 5 years. I've been working for a long time in Palo Alto. I know the city and the people here pretty well, and I guess I just feel it's time to help back with a bit of environment and coaching. I've also worked in the past with the Architecture Review Board of the city, and prior to that with the San Mateo County. So I have some sense of what a review board has to do, and it's generally pretty careful to focus on what Architecture Review Boards do. All of us would love to be able to stipulate what the planning should be. That's not even your position often. It's tough to do. As the architecture, you're really focused on the style, what it looks like, how we can come back to it. To the questions you were talking about a little bit, my core philosophy at Topos Architects, Topos is a Greek term, sort of differentiating the sense between a house and a home, a place and a space. We strive to make every building fit into the environment, into the community. In Palo Alto, that's critically important. It's a wonderful town with an interesting fabric. The buildings need to fit in. That means you need to be cognizant of who the neighbors are, left and right, what the nature of the community is. I think good architecture in town doesn't have to be modern or traditional style, but it has to fit in. It's an urban environment here. Buildings are next to each other. People see all kinds of things. And that should be a primary focus. It's my underlying philosophy. All right, leave it at that. Right?
You have a couple of very articulate things about one of the roles of the ARB is to tell the public, show the public modern styles and designs, what it means. We had a little discussion about the 801.
Yes, listen to interest.
As I walk around the city, people look at the 801 and see the outside of the prison. They go by the Mitchell Park and they keep saying, when are they going to take that blue, something on that blue wall? And they go by the JCC and say, gee, it's the largest advertising north of Times Square.
Yeah, it's pretty large, it's true.
Now, what can the ARB do on proposals like that? What kind of articulation do you think should take place at the ARB?
I actually think the ARB has a fairly substantial input to those type of issues, and it is perfectly appropriate to say, take the Mitchell Park line and come back to the architect and say that blue facade is going to be too strong. It's not appropriate or in place, and not even my own stylistic sense, but the town as a whole is just not going to get behind it. So please help us out, come back with another solution. I think that's exactly what the ARB should be doing, is having the wisdom to see that this design on paper with a fairly large, brightly colored facade in the corner of Mitchell Park, which has never had anything but a one-story low-lying building, is not appropriate. And that's when you do have to stand fairly strongly and say that. I find in my past work with other review boards, a lot of it is talking to your colleagues on the board, making sure in the course of the meeting, not outside of that you can come to some agreement that it's not that you're about policing the style. The contemporary style is perfectly suitable. But there's good ways to do it, and there's inappropriate ways to do it. So the examples you gave to me are bordering on inappropriate, and that is essentially your core job.
Gail?
Welcome. I noticed you had a phrase here, modernist sensibility, or
Modernist
sensibility. Can you describe how you would address sort of the modernist, more contemporary themes in general terms? Can you think of examples where a modernist design has been improved, or the end result, or something you find pleasing?
Well, sure, in general terms, to me, it all has to do with the materials you're using. And to me, I take this table to walnut veneer, and it's a gorgeous piece of wood. The edge of this is a very simple detail. It's a very modern detail. There's not a lot of embellishment. To me, that's what I strive for in my practice, is to use materials that are warm and rich and attractive to people, that fit into a town like Palo Alto, stone, wood, in a clean and contemporary way. In our current lives, we have machines that can make these edges appropriately, efficiently, economically. That's what we should be doing. It's balancing that. You can't just make a building out of raw concrete and expect people to like it. Most of us don't, and won't, and never will. You can't go back to a building with traditional molded shingles from a roof. I mean, clay roof shingles used to be molded on a man's thigh. We're past that time. That's not traditional. That was just a matter of the past. To me, it's a matter of focusing on the materials and appropriate use of them. Is that too general?
No, that's okay.
It's sort of philosophical. I get asked that question once a week.
Sort of architectural elements in design, you're saying, as part of the entire experience.
I'm a big friend of Ken Hayes, is a local architect. I'm sure you know him. He frequently uses things like a limestone cladding on his veneer buildings. Across the street from the public housing is the Phil's Coffee Shop building. Look carefully at the material he used on the side of that. It's rich. It's warm. Nobody would say he's a traditionalist, but there's something about those materials compared to the painted stucco on the other building that has a difference when you walk by. There's also great issues of scale, and I'm sure there's an economic factor that the building is expensive. But those materials really do count. The architecture board really can have an impact on that. That's what you're there for.
Nancy?
Oh, yes, thank you. You're local, so have you done any projects in Palo Alto that we can identify?
I've done many, many houses in Palo Alto.
Okay.
I haven't done any commercial work.
And whereabouts are there?
Houses I've done?
Yeah.
We just finished a large house in Professorville. You would never know it because it fits in so nicely on the corner of Lincoln and Emerson. It's a shingle-style house that
Okay.
I believe is little brother to all the big ones around
Okay,
here.
so
To
it's
me,
a
that-
brand new house then?
It's a brand new house.
Okay.
To me, I was very proud of the fact that it just seems to fit.
Uh-huh.
And I think, I mean, we do a lot of work in town, a lot of people talk to me, and I've gotten a lot of feedback and sort of thank you. Professorville is sort of a tormented area about development. And I understand it. I went through a lot of it just trying to get that project going, and I gave a lot of thought to what's the appropriate kind of paths.
So how would you translate that into, you know, it looks like there will be some projects coming into South Palo Alto, and they've been beaten heavily, you know, with some of the aggressive building up to the street. How would you go about integrating those designs better?
Well, I think you have to, on a review, at least in the past when I've reviewed projects, I always find I end up picking a couple of points that I think can be improved. You can't just wholesale say the project is no good. You really shouldn't just wholesale approve things. I mean, you have to sort of, I tend to be looking at, say the project is too close to the street. You might say, look, we need to really think about the proximity. There's usually a good reason for it that's way beyond the architecture, the economics, or the urban use. But you say, let's see if we can change that facade to make it more pedestrian friendly. Maybe we can put a porch there. Could you consider a different use of materials like I've been talking about? Maybe some natural stone or something. But soft suggestions and focusing on one or two places, generally I've found produces more results than a large-scale blanket.
Okay.
Again, addressing your question.
Well, yeah, no, there's just, you know, that's a very random neighborhood, I would
Oh, in
consider.
South Palo
because-
Alto,
Yeah, well, in Barron Park and that type of thing, there's a different look there, and yet there's a couple projects that are actively percolating right now. So I was just wondering what your thinking was on integrating that into that type of, you know.
I guess the overall challenge comes down to mixing the residential history with the fact that Palo Alto is really a growing large town. So you want to blend that sensibility.
Sure.
I'm not sure you want everything to be a town and country style, but maybe not all modern either. I think that the review board does, on a larger scale, need to consider that the review board is made up of architects. Architects love modern architecture. Doesn't mean the whole town does. Maybe, I felt this a bit. There's a bit of a brew stirring about the new office building on the corner of Lytton, which I'm surprised as I drive by every morning. It's pretty large. Granted, it's across the street from the train station, but maybe a little bit of effort to get feedback from the town. Again, it's not about us as architects giving a style to the city. It's about listening to the town and making sure it fits with what most people in town like and want. And I think a lot of architects are guilty, actually, of not listening that well. That's one thing I think the Architecture Review Board could try harder to do, is to sort of reach out a little bit. Maybe you have a great website. Here's a project of the month. What do you think? Get people to give us some input. Architects also are, you can influence us. I want to hear. And when people time and again don't like the super modern stuff that's way out on the edge, that should temper your thinking. It should make a difference on the overall sense of what you do.
Karen?
You've partially addressed a couple of questions I was going to ask. So I'm going to focus on a couple of projects and a question or two about those projects. So you've written in here, there's like, approvals could sometimes be granted more rapidly by keeping the ARB focused on larger scale issues. So take that comment and apply it to, say, Alma Plaza. I'll just stick with that project. What do you mean by larger scale issues and quicker review? So, for instance, one of the things the public has commented a lot about Alma Plaza. One of the things I haven't heard the public comment about much is, and it's a detail, but it's a very important one, it's a safety issue, is when you walk out of Starbucks, you are in the traffic lane. You are in the traffic lane.
I wish someone.
So what do you mean by focusing on the larger and faster review?
Not that,
and
because that's such a planning issue that's set before the project comes to the ARB. A lot of those issues have been set. It's very tough to change how you approach that problem.
Shouldn't the ARB have say in that? I mean,
Should have a say, but in conjunction with the Planning Commission, in conjunction with City Council, that project went around for years to figure out what to do on that lot. I think that when I say efficiently approve it, I've been with review boards before where the review board gets so hung up on, say, the color of a piece of plaster and ends up continuing a project for something like that. And that's just doing a disservice to an applicant, not to try to get things moving through. It doesn't matter so much. It's a funny dynamic. You get 5 people together, and sometimes something just sort of catches somebody, and that's the wrong color, and so therefore we have to continue you for a month, 2 months. And it's not really doing a service to the community to keep somebody waiting for something that's not really that important. That's what I mean by focusing on larger issues.
And so what would you do if an applicant was non-responsive to ARB requests for change?
Ultimately, you continue with the project if they're not working with you. But you try pretty hard to not close somebody out completely. But together with the force of a group of 5 people, you have quite a bit of effort. I've never come across a situation where applicants don't listen. Usually what happens is they come back to you with the revised designs that only get 20% of what, as a group, you were talking about. And then what do? They've gone through this process. I think you have to ultimately hold firm, though. It's not a matter of try 3 times and then you get approved. There's a standard. You have to meet that standard.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Thank you. If you want to just sum up or say.
I've been working in town a long time, and I'm just sort of, like all of you, volunteering with a little bit of trepidation. This is a big job, and every month there's half a dozen intense projects that take a lot of time to review before the meeting. Nonetheless, I'm willing to do my share for 3 years.
Well, thank you very much. Robert Coyer. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, it looks like I'm a little bit different than the other 2 candidates. I don't live in the community, but as I said in my application, I started my career here. My wife was born and raised here, and I go to church here. So it's if it isn't the community I live in, it's probably the closest community that I'm associated with in the peninsula. Most of it is already what you've seen in my application, so considering with this many of you, feel free to go and ask me some questions.
Glad to start.
Liz?
So you have said you don't live in the community.
Right.
But do you enjoy the community regardless?
Oh, absolutely, and spend a lot of time here. My wife's 102-year-old mother still lives here, so that gives us a very good reason to be here on a very regular basis.
So we've been discussing very specific buildings in response to those very specific buildings. I think we've called out 3 that perhaps you'd like to comment on. And I also would,
Sort of a good or bad type thing?
Well, just, I don't think good or bad, but reflect on, how do they, you see them, how do they hit you?
Okay.
For example, the one on Alma that's new has caused all kinds of response.
I could see that. Very first time I drove by that, it was sort of a whoa. I guess I'm not a big fan of the building, at least not the side that approaches or that faces Alma. I know there's a problem in the sense that in an area, especially if it's low-income housing, you want to try and increase the density that you can, and get as much for the community. But the problem is that, like I said, sometimes in this sort of drastic desire to get more density in there, it loses something in the texture that the building provides, and I'm not really a big fan. Even the other side, I don't think really blends in with the area around it. If it was going to be put anywhere, it's probably better there than in some other areas. I mean, assuming if you took the same design, and it's probably better there than in other areas, but that doesn't make it a good design for that particular location.
And the Mickey's, Alma Plaza, and the JCC, any comments?
I guess it's what the areas, if you want to call it SOFA, I guess it's called it, the area where the old clinic used to be. I think that turned out beautifully. That was, usually infill has a tendency to look like infill, where it's like, oh, obviously now we're coming into the new section, and I was very impressed with the work that's been done there. I think that works really well. It's great with the context, and you really have to know what's been going on there to realize that you've gone from an older portion of town, and actually a very nice older portion of town, to a new portion of town.
Thanks.
Karen?
Thank you for your comments and your application. And how would you, two things. One is, do you have a definition of compatibility? You talk about how the SOFA new development blends in with the existing neighborhood, so there's that transitional aspect of that. So do you have a definition of compatibility that you apply in your own work? And the other is, there's been a lot of criticism of the ARB that everything is modernist. What's your view of that? Yes,
Okay.
no, combination, what?
Well, I guess, like I said, having not been on the ARB, here, everything being modernist, see, I think is a problem. I think good architecture doesn't need to be modern, or it just needs to be good quality architecture. I mean, I have clients that come up, or people that come up and say, what style do you design in? And I mean, to me, that's the dumbest question possible. It's like, I can design in any style you want. My goal is to give you the best building in what you're looking for. If you're looking for a French Tudor, I can design you a French Tudor that you'll love. It'll be a quality product, and it will reflect the accuracy of what the product should be. And so I think, unfortunately, if the ARB has gotten that sort of handle on it, that they put out too much modern, I think that's a problem with the ARB. I think it's something that there needs to be the key quality. I mean, is quality of the product and the character, how it fits into its surrounding, I think, are the two key things that the ARB needs to do, unlike the Planning Commission, which is, a different aspect of it. I lost my train of thought. I forgot your first portion of the question.
The other question was, do you have a
Right.
definition of compatibility that you use for yourself?
So many things can do that. You can put a brand or a new, modern, very slick, sophisticated building next to, like I said, a more traditional building, and deal with color scheme or schemes that are similar, proportions that are similar. I mean, you could have a 3 or 4 story modern building that echoes maybe a traditional building right next to it if you follow the lines of it, the proportions of it. So I don't think it's that difficult to blend or to make something work so it looks like it goes together. And you don't have to say, oh, that's obviously the same as this. It's not a matter of copying it, but it's a matter of sensing to the average person that goes, I mean, architecture is a comfort, I think, or a feeling that you walk by and you go, it's the old, I don't really know why, but I like that, that sort of thing. And that's what I try and accomplish when I have to put something in an area that's, for instance, fairly well, set.
Thank you very much.
Nancy?
I think that's a great description. And so could you, do we have any of your projects here in Palo Alto?
I don't, mainly, let me back up a little bit. Probably 80% of my work is medical. I do acute medical, hospitals, that sort of thing. And then, as I tell people, if I did 100% of that, I'd go totally nuts from all the regulations and everything else. So I purposely have the other 20% is unusual projects, that sort of thing. Here, actually, is in Palo Alto, one of the main things I've done, and that was more of a courtesy, is I go to church at Trinity on Middlefield. And it started in, I think, 94 when they had an arson fire there, burned part of the building down. So they came to me and said, we'd like you to repair that. And so I did that. And while we were there, it had sort of some strange add-ons that had been applied over the years. So it was a good time to get rid of those funky add-ons, which were obviously the proverbial, that was obviously added at a later time. And so everybody was very happy with it. I've done some, residential things around here. Again, just happened to be here. And then I guess one of the latest projects is I was involved in setting up the restaurant, the Patio, last year.
Okay. And then, so is there anything, medical hospitals, anything that we would be able to identify you with, or?
Oh, as far as here, no, a lot of the things, see, with medical, it's sort of usually, in fact, I'm a very strange duck on the peninsula, is that most firms that do acute medical are like 400-person firms because the projects are massive. I'm a sole practitioner, and I do work for almost every hospital up and down the peninsula, from the medical centers down in San Jose up to hospitals in San Francisco, and most of my work is internal. So I could say I redesign
Sure.
The new
Okay.
that sort of thing.
Okay, I just wanted to know if there was anything identifiable that we would be able to.
Probably not.
Okay.
You probably have gone by numerous occasions, but have never done it.
Sure. All right.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to retire. Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you want to call it for?
Calling the special meeting of the City Council for 6 p.m. to order. Councilmember Berman.
Here.
Councilmember Byrd. Councilmember Holman. Here. Councilmember Klein.
Here.
Councilmember Niss. Here. Councilmember Price. Here. Mayor Sharp.
Here.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Here?
Vice Mayor Shepherd.
Here.
8 present, and council will be going into a closed session on the public employee performance evaluation of the city clerk.
Correct.
And the next one is not going to be heard on the city auditor.
That's correct.
Nancy, I